the definition of a rite of passage is a ceremony or event that marks a transition into a new stage of life. And in usual, it's a growing of life. And so to me, that's what this race was, is not only the things that you go through is an absolute growth process, but the 3 digits, the 100 miles. I mean, I was telling you guys on those last podcasts that for me, this was my welcoming into the ultra running world, and that there's a lot of people probably doubting me. And to me, this was my rite of passage. This was my proof to the world that I'm different than a lot of these people, and that I really can make a big spark in this sport.
Running 100 miles seems impossible, and maybe even kind of crazy. And it is, but we believe in big crazy dreams. That's why we ran 100 miles. It was such a life-changing experience for us, we decided to devote this podcast to preparing and inspiring you to run your first ultra race.
Are you ready to feel the highest highs and the lowest lows? Are you ready to do what you once thought was impossible? Are you ready for your trail to 100? Thank you for joining us here on Trail to 100, the podcast made to help you. If you're looking on the YouTube version, I'm pointing right at you. You run 100 miles. My name is Jacob Bateman, and joined along with me is my beautiful and lovely wife, Melody, today. And as our guest, we have returning back on the podcast, Jake Rastas. Now, Jake just ran his first 100-mile race. He had previously done a 50-miler and a 100K, and he had moved his way up onto the 100-mile distance. Now, Jake lives out in Wisconsin, and he signed up for a mountain 100 out in Colorado in a race that reached over 12,000 feet in vertical. Jake was able to share his experience about how he trained for a mountain race, living in a flat region, and how he developed the mindset to go conquer those mountains, even though he didn't live by them or didn't live by any mountains. And I think what Jake had to share was sometimes it can feel like a kick in the pants, and I share that on the podcast. And I actually talked to Jake about some things that he said that sometimes I don't always agree with or might rub me wrong at first, but me and Jake were able to talk about those things and figure out where he's coming from. And honestly, Jake has a great mindset about how to finish 100-mile races. He's a go-getter, no excuse, and I think those kind of mindsets are infectious. And everyone's got to have a little bit of that mindset, if not a lot of that mindset, to finish a 100-mile race. So excited for you guys to hear this one. Let's get to it. Jake Rastas. Jake, thank you once again for joining us on the podcast this time to tell us about the big 100-mile race, which you just finished. So congrats on that, and we are excited to hear about it.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me. Had to wear my T-shirt.
Heck yeah.
To represent my Trail to 100 shirt.
So he's got the Trail to 100 swag going on.
Looks good on you, man.
Yeah,
looks good on you.
The green looks great.
And congratulations to you too, Jake. I saw you completed the Scout 100, and I was laughing when I saw Melody post about you got a text at mile 70 saying, I'm in a dark spot, or I'm in a dark place. And I was just laughing because I'm like, I know that feeling intimately, and I'm shaking hands with that feeling. And it was cool to see you, pull it off, and it's awesome, man. Congratulations to you as well.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. I'm excited to hear about your dark places that you went. But to start this off, we'll get into the details here, but I wanted to ask you a little more broad question. You actually have a little a documentary or something like a video recap of your race coming out, right?
Yeah, so that's going to be released from the day we record this on July 17th. It's going to be released on July 22nd. It's going to be released on my YouTube, Ultra Vet Rastas. So basically, we just got footage documenting the whole thing and due to pretty in-depth recap. I mean, the footage is epic. The stories are epic. And if you guys are listening, you want to see what the ultra running world's like, I mean, this documentary does a really good job of it. I'm really excited. I've been putting it together all week. My brother is going to help me, who works in marketing and advertising. So it's legit, man. It's called a rite of passage.
Yeah,
so I'm
and
pretty excited about it.
That's what I wanted to, the rite of passage. I saw that name and I was like, ooh, I like that. Why is it called the rite of passage?
So the definition of a rite of passage is a ceremony or event that marks a transition into a new stage of life. And in usual, it's a growing of life. And so to me, that's what this race was, is not only the things that you go through is an absolute growth process, but the 3 digits, the 100 miles. I mean, I was telling you guys on those last podcasts that for me, this was my welcoming into the ultra running world, and that there's a lot of people probably doubting me. And to me, this was my rite of passage. This was my proof to the world that I'm different than a lot of these people, and that I really can make a big spark in this sport. So that's where the name kind of came from.
I love that.
I like that. That is really
right.
That's neat. Yeah.
I think that's, because like I remember in history class, the rite of passage, I remember like the Native Americans, they would send the men out when they became a certain age, basically on their own to go figure out life on their own, they didn't have anybody else, like it's just, hey, it's up to you to survive and figure out essentially how to thrive and then come back once you figured that out. And that is 100-mile race right there.
Oh yeah, you come out of a 100-mile race a different person. You have a different personality after you cross the finish line.
Completely. And one of my favorite guys that I listen to, his name's Inky Johnson, former college football athlete at Tennessee. He's a big speaker now, and he says that the whole point of the storm, the hypothetical storm in this situation being the 100-mile race, is that you're not the same man after you come out of it. You're not the same man that walked into it, and that's what the storm is all about. That's the whole point of it. The whole point of the 100-mile race is to become a different person, to become a stronger person, to become a leader, and learn all those things that you can't get that anywhere else. So
no, you can't. No textbook will ever teach you that. So, Jake, before we get to race day, take us through training. Just like a recap of your training process. Like how did training go for you? Did things go as planned? Were there setbacks during training? Like what was your attack plan? How did it go and how did you execute it?
Yeah, so the biggest hurdle with this race was one, going what would be 37 miles more than I've ever gone. 2 is also the biggest hurdle is the altitude. In my entire life, I've never gone above 7,000 feet, or I think 6,000, because the most I've ever been at just in my entire life was when we played at Southern Utah in the Coliseum there, which I believe is at about 6,000, and we played a football game there. Mm-hmm. And so that was the 2 big hurdles, was how am I going to get my body to go 37 more miles, and how am I going to get my body to train at sea level and be able to not pass out on top of a mountain at 12,000 feet. The average altitude the entire race was at 7,000. So what I did in my training was I just ramped up my volume. My new baseline for, I guess, what would you say, just an average run? My new baseline was what it was in the past for my other races, was about 6 to 8 miles. I didn't run anything less than 10. So everything was just added more distance. I added more leg lifts to make sure that my legs can climb that much. And so I just ramped up my volume. Instead of running, on average 50 miles a week for my big training block, like basically 4 weeks out from the race, I ramped up to 70. I even had an 80-mile week in there. So I really ramped up the volume just to get myself to go that far. And to how I handled the altitude was, the first thing is you just got to get yourself mentally prepared for it. Because if you go up there and you believe that you don't belong on top of a mountain, you're going to prove yourself right. So I just mentally prepared myself going into it. Second thing I did was I listened to Jeremy Reynolds, and I sat in the sauna a ton, used the heat to acclimate, and because that kind of simulates a lot of the physiology that your body's going to do, so you use heat. So I did a lot of sauna preparations, and then I basically just put in the work, and it was running every day, took it day by day. I had a lot of good runs, and yes, the training went as planned. I thought I executed the training. This was the best training camp I've had going into any race.
No injuries, no real setbacks. You just executed. You made a good plan and you executed it.
Jacob, I'm a professional. I'm dialed in on nutrition. I'm dialed in on hydration. I'm dialed in on volume. I was lifting. I was soft tissue work, stretching. I was checking every single box to make sure that if I came up short of that race, I knew I could look at myself in the mirror and be like, you truly did everything right.
Yeah. And so, okay, this is something that I definitely don't do the best at. And I think you do probably really good at this, researching how to train and figuring out, because did you just create your own plan, or were you coached?
No, I've always created my own plan since the day I started running. I've always just done what I think is right, and then if I come up on something, like maybe I have a question or two, there's so many sources out there.
Yeah.
There's so many YouTube videos. Melody, I know you coach. There's so many coaches out there that you could contact. So I've really just come together with my own thing.
Yeah. And so, like, how much time do you think on average, like per week or per month, do you think you put into just researching stuff, especially when you were getting started?
Yeah, I would say on a let's go down to a per week basis, so I feel like I could give a more accurate amount. I would say I would at least spend 4 to 5 hours a week, or 4 to 5 hours a week in the last 4 weeks leading up to the race, and then kind of sparsely throughout, kind of gearing a training plan. But I mean, I was dialed in about. I was reading people that ran mountain races. I was reading all about people that wrote blogs about Leadville. I was reading all about people, how they handle the altitude. I was even reading just people going up for hikes, not even ultra runners. Just how do you handle altitude coming from sea level? And then from that, you know, I would listen to podcasts, like your guys' podcast, Ultra Running Guys' podcast. There's tons of resources out there.
Yeah.
What would you say are your top 5 resources?
Number one for me personally is the podcast, just because that's what I like to listen to. So I really like, you know, those ones that I've named. I do think that there's tons of just blogs, like short journal articles. The number 3 would probably be YouTube videos of experienced runners. There's tons of YouTube channels out there where they talk about races. They kind of do similar things that I do. 4 would be probably scientific literature, because I'm like, you know what, I'm going to be a veterinarian. I think like a scientist, and science, you know, to me makes sense. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and get the physiological adaptations to the altitude. So, and then number 5 would probably just my own experience. And I would honestly probably rank that number 1, because your own experience is the best.
Yeah.
Amen. I would second that for sure.
You know, and as we're talking about this, like, yeah, 4 to 5 hours a week, dang, dude, like, we think about training and the hours that we need to put into training, but yeah, especially if you are creating your own training plan, if you're doing it on your own, if you don't want to hire a coach, like, I think you make a really good point here, Jake. Like, if you want to run 100 miles, you need to put the time in to research and figure it out. You know, when you're experience problems, when you're experience setback, if training's not going as planned, you know, or if you're just trying to figure it out in the first place, like, honestly, what you're saying here is something I don't think a lot of people talk about. You need to research. Get the content.
Completely. And the sources are available. And you know, one thing that you just made me think of is the day before the race, I told my girlfriend, Mackenzie, I said, if I'm going to do this thing, I can't just be interested in running 100 miles. I have to run 100 miles. I have to, in my head, I have to do this. And I know I've talked about that before, but it's like you become just a different monster when you have to do something and you're not just interested in doing something.
Yeah.
Does that ever cause resentment? Because it does for me. Like, if I tell myself I have to do this thing, then I feel like trapped, and then I don't enjoy it as much, and I build resentment. Have you ever experienced that?
To me, when I feel trapped and when I feel like I have no way out, when your back's against the wall, I feel like that's when I perform the best. That's the lifestyle I like to live, is where I'm surrounded by chaos, and the only way out of this is forward. So for me personally, I like the feeling of trapped. And I don't feel resentment. I may feel rage, and I may feel driven, but I use it in a good way.
Yeah.
That's great. That is great. Okay, so you say that your plan was dialed in, you executed it to a T. Now, what was your plan? I want to know, like, how did you lay this all out?
Yeah, so sitting at about 6 weeks is when I start, like, really amping up my volume. So I'm usually at baseline at all times, and then once I hit that 6 week mark, I amp up my volume. So at first it was 20, I usually run about 30-ish miles a week. Then I hit the 6 week mark, and then I ramp up to 50, and then I hit another week of like 50, and then I hit another week of like 70. And then about 2 weeks out from the race is when I hit that taper period. So that's when I start dialing it back down. And then I start just doing back to like maybe 30 miles a week for those next 2. So that's what I did for volume. The second plan was with the sauna training. I heard that you don't just want to sauna train the whole time. What you want to do is 2 weeks before the race is when you start using that. So I started sauna training 2 weeks out, and what I would do is I would spend like 10 minutes in, and I would actually, and this I just came up with my head, is I would actually hold my breath in the sauna, and I would try and like create an oxygen deprived situation. And I would just do that like 4 or 5 times a week, those last 2 weeks leading up to the race, where that was my heat training that would simulate my altitude acclimation period. And then in terms of like lifting and everything, I lift 6 days a week. I lift each body part two times a week, and I do compound exercises, squats, single leg, lunges, squats, all that kind of stuff. Nutrition, I just eat a lot of food. I eat genuinely pretty healthy. I mean, I'm not eating a lot of fast food, but I just eat a lot. And then hydration, it's a gallon of water a day. That's what I aim for.
That's fantastic. Definitely sounds like you have it dialed in.
So I've heard the whole like, you know, go to the sauna, you know, to get the heat training and also, you know, the altitude, but hold your breath in the sauna.
I'm glad you didn't pass out. Also, did you get any weird looks when you're like in the corner, like trying not to pass out?
Well, luckily, I usually go pretty early in the morning, because I get up at like 5 a.m. and we go to the gym at like probably about. So I'm in there about 5:30, 5:45, and usually there's not a lot of people in there. So luckily, I avoid that crowd.
Yeah. Well, that's good. I guess as an ultra runner, you just get used to weird looks anyways. So.
Oh yeah, completely.
Yeah, and last thing, you know, just before we move on from this topic and how you researched your 100. We asked you some questions beforehand about your race, and one of your answers kind of struck me at first. And at first I'm like, what kind of answer is that? Like, it kind of bugged me. But then, you know, and I even brought it up to Melody, and I was like, look what Jake said about this. And then as I talked about it, as I read it off to Melody, then all of a sudden I saw the second perspective, and I was like, oh, you know, like, that's what he's getting at. At least that's what I got out of it. So the question was, is there anything you wish you would have known beforehand? And you said none.
Well, you know, before you answer, I just have to say, because we've interviewed you before, we've been following you, I feel like we know your personality. And I was like, of course that's Jake's answer. I was like, he wouldn't go back and change anything, you know? What's done is done.
Yeah.
That was what I thought.
Yeah, but then also I thought in my head, like, oh, it's probably because he actually did his research and executed, you know, like unlike me, who went into my first 100 like with just, you know, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, not realizing.
We did our research. Like, we did research.
Yeah, but we weren't doing
research enough.
I wasn't doing 4 to 5 hours a week. Definitely not. Yeah, that would have benefited me a lot. So, anyways, I actually go ahead.
No, I was just saying that's like the way my brain works. Is I need to. If I want to figure out how to do something, I'm going to obsess over it. And I made this is actually one of my captions on one of my posts because it rings so true, is Conor McGregor stole it from Vincent van Gogh, but there's a quote that says, I've given myself to this game and I've lost my mind in the process. And that rings really true with me, is because I feel like that. It's like I've just become obsessed with this, and it's almost like you want to just master it. So once you get obsessed, everything becomes ultra running. Everything becomes, I can use that for ultra running, even though if it has nothing to do with running, you know?
Yeah.
Can I say, I don't know if I should interject this, but it just popped in my head, so I'm going to share it. But when you say that, I haven't been able to run, obviously, and I'm literally like, what else do I enjoy? I'm like, I've been trying all these other things. I'm like, I'll go get my nails done. I'll go watch movies with friends. I'll go out to eat, like all these other things that aren't running. And I'm like, nothing is fun unless I'm running. And I'm like, I don't know if this is a problem. Like, I've literally become so obsessed with it that it's the only thing that brings me joy. I don't know.
I'll tell you what, we're all wired the same. And some people are just not meant to just sit and relax and
Amen.
Just kind of be sedentary. Some people are not meant for that. And I feel like we are not meant for that. And that's just why we're drawn to this sport. that aspect of it, I just can't be like that. I always have to feel like I'm in a fight. I always have to feel like there's a war that I'm in, and some people, and you're the same way.
Yeah, I guess it's that personality that's attracted to ultra running, so that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. All right, moving on to the race. We got to hear about this. So you did the Ring the Springs 100-mile race out in Colorado Springs. And for our listeners who haven't listened to Jake beforehand, I'd recommend go back, listen to our first episode with you. You live out in Wisconsin. You talked about your first 50-miler and your first 100K, which were great experiences in their own. So this one's got 15,000 feet of vert, as you were talking about with, having to get ready for the climbing and doing the leg lifts. So how are you feeling? Let's just fast forward to the day before the race. You're out in Colorado now. How are you feeling? Like the 100-mile distance is becoming real. It's happening. It's the next morning. What's going through your head?
Yeah, so I stayed with one of my friends in Colorado Springs, just outside of Denver, at 9,000 feet. So that way I could stay a little bit higher than what I would average be at. And I went for a little short run 2 days before the race. So that was like my big confidence builder, is because I was like, you know what? I feel fine. I can handle this altitude. So, should you really go out for a run 2 days before your race? I mean, I would say yeah, in general, but really if you're at that altitude and you're worried about that, that was just more of a confidence builder than anything else. But anyways, so that was like, then that following day, right, the day before the race, I mean, I had the confidence. I was just staying relaxed. I was letting the feelings and emotions come as they may. I wasn't overthinking it, and I just felt ready to go. I mean, I just felt extremely confident. And when you have constant preparation and consistency, that carries conviction, and you will believe that you're going to be able to execute. So with my preparation, with my discipline, with my training block, I had just really, really good confidence, and I was just staying calm, waiting for my opportunity.
Yeah. What you say actually really reminds me. I don't know if you ever heard of this guy. He's got a podcast of his own, Joe Corcione. He has a Everyday Ultra podcast, and we had him on as a guest, and almost you two
are very similar.
Yeah, and you almost just gave the exact answer that Joe gave us before his first 100-miler. He talked about how he walked up to that start line, and he was like, I really didn't have nerves because I knew I put the training in. He's like, I'd done my research, I'd done my training, I had talked with people, I had put it in, and I knew that I was ready for it. So
yeah, and I would go ahead.
Go ahead. No, you go ahead.
I was just gonna say that, like race day, kind of the anxiety that comes on race day and like that feeling of anxiousness and butterflies, that's different than nerves. When you have nerves, you generally feel unprepared. I was prepared and I felt calm, but I still had the race day like just anxiousness and butterflies. And we used to like talk about this in football when like leading up to the game, you are so amped up and you have those same feelings, and all it takes is that first hit, that first tackle, the first big hit, and everything just goes away. And for me, it's the same exact feeling with running. And it's like once you get that first mile down, everything just goes away. And you just kind of like, you settle in and you're like, all right, we're here.
Yeah.
That's so true. So true. I love that you said that. And I think that can help you with the race day jitters, is just remind yourself it's scary right now, but as soon as the gun goes off and we get going, that'll all melt away.
Yeah. Completely.
So how did the race go? Take us through a little recap of the overall race.
Yeah, so I mean, Colorado Springs, first of all, is just a beautiful area, and we got a full tour. I'd say about 80% of the race was through like trail and mountain country, and then 20% was kind of through like the urban streets of Colorado Springs. So the first 6 miles, head out, feeling really good. Got to the first aid station, and I was just really like trying to just stay present. I was through the Garden of the Gods, so it was just gorgeous.
Wow. Yeah.
Sun's coming up. I mean, this is all in the documentary, and you'll just see this place is stunning. And get to the first aid station, feeling good, and then you head out. Now you have a 12-mile stretch through the trails out into mountain country. So you hit about mile like 10-ish, and you start going straight incline, and you got 2,000 feet of vert in about 3 miles. So it's some serious vert. And I was just flying up this thing, feeling really good, past 2 people, probably going way too fast than I should have. And I just felt good. It was taking in all the scenery, was trying to stay present. And everything was going really well, and I got to the mile 18 aid station. And now this was the big moment, because I'm at mile 18. I'm probably at about 7,000-ish feet, and I have 8 miles of straight vert, 5,000 feet, to summit Mount Rosa at 12,000 feet.
Ooh.
So this was like the big test. This was the thing that was giving me fear. This was the thing that was like always in my head. And I just was like, all right, there's a moment where it was on video where it's like, I'm looking at the mountain. I just say, Mount Rosa, meet Jake Rastas. And I was just ready to go. And this thing became my enemy. Like I imagined it as an actual enemy. And I started, I sent off, and you start hiking up, and you're making your way up, feeling really good still, feeling really strong. And I get to the mile 22 and a half aid station. Now this aid station is no crew access, really no aid access. It's just 2 guys took their dirt bikes up the trails, and there's like water and a little bit of food. And it's like, this is pretty remote, and you're at about 10,000 feet.
Yeah.
And so I pop a squat, and I'm sitting there, and one of the cowboys looks at me, and it's just me and him. And he goes, he's like working the aid station, and he looks at me and he goes, "So where are you from, man?" And I was like, "From Madison, Wisconsin." And he just cracked the stupidest grin I have ever seen. Just completely looked at me with a smug grin, like I was an absolute fool. And he looks at me and he goes, and he starts laughing, and he goes, "Every year I see people from sea level try and do these altitude races. The altitude always gets them."
Oh, what? And this is a guy from the aid station? Someone needs to teach him how to crew. That is nuts.
No, I would thank him. I would shake his hand if I saw him at the finish line.
I guess he did say the right thing to you.
And I saw complete red in that moment, and I was just enraged. And of course, I laughed it off and didn't say anything. But in my mind, the rest of that race, the rest of climbing that mountain, his smile was ingrained in my head. And I still I see it so vividly, his smile. And he embodied every single person that's ever laughed at me for wanting to do ultras, every single person that laughed at me when I told them I was going to do a mountain ultra. Every person that, I said, "Hey, I'm going to do a 100-mile race, and I've only been running ultras for a year," and everyone laughs, and, "Oh, you need a lot more training for that." Like, "Oh, that's only for the elite runners." And everybody just laughed all around at me. And in that moment, it was just it became a personal war where it was like, oh, this isn't about the 100-mile race anymore. This is about proving this and every dude wrong. And I remember last time on this podcast, I told you about all the 100-miler people that, are like, "Oh, he's nothing until he runs 100 miles until he runs 100 miles. This person represented all those people. And I left that aid station like a man on a mission, and I just power hiked my way up this mountain. I had about 3 miles to go, 2,000 feet to go. And I climbed and I climbed and I climbed, my head down, and I climbed. And I got up to above the clouds. I got up to the snow. There was snow on the peak. And it was just, I'm standing up on top of this mountain. I summited the mountain, top 10. And because I could count the runners as they came down. And I'm out loud talking trash to this mountain and this guy. And I'm sitting there, and I'm like, out loud, I'm like, "This mountain is nothing. This is just a big old rock. I am the mountain." And then I'm just like, and then I'm like, "The kid from sea level conquered the mountain," just talking trash. And I just had such an adrenaline rush, and I just started descending off the mountain, feeling really, really good. And then as you're on your way down, you have about 5 miles until the next aid station. So you've got to descend quite a bit. And there's a water drop where they just dropped off two water jugs where you could refill. And this was at about mile 30. And I sit there and I'm refilling, and I look behind me, and drops over the mountains, dark, scary Mother Nature clouds.
Uh-oh.
And to me, the first thought in my head was, this is what I get for talking trash to Mother Nature. She's about to humble me.
Dude, she's coming back, dude. It's round
Coming
2
back.
now.
Pissed. And I start kind of like, all right, I got to get off this mountain because it looks like storms are rolling in. So I start sprinting down this mountain, and the clouds engulf me. It starts raining. It starts hailing. Thunder is cracking everywhere. The wind is picked up. And I'm like 2 miles away from this aid station. And it got to the point where I was seeing lightning. And I looked down in my hands, and I have 2 metal conducting rods in my hands called trekking poles. Yeah. And I'm like at tree line. And I'm like, all right, this is not good. And so I literally jumped into a ditch and like threw the poles out of my hand and was like, I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
Like I was about to send the text saying I'm in a bad place, like pulling a Jacob Bateman.
Yeah. Literally though, in a bad place.
Yeah. And I'm sitting there and I end up waiting this thing out for like 10 to 15 minutes because I'm like, I don't know what to do. And comes running down the trail is this guy named Quinn Keller, who's an experienced like runner, and he spends a lot of time in the mountains. And he's just running down, and I flag him down. I'm like, hey, dude, what? And he's like, this is classic, just amazing ultra running community story. And he's like, hey, man, he's all excited to see me. And I go, aren't you worried with the lightning and your poles? And he like, as we're getting hailed on, and he looks down and he's like, well, I wasn't until you mentioned something. And so together, we're just like, all right, best thing we can do right now is just run as fast as we can down this mountain. So we are running down. This race became just fight or flight. We were running like 8-minute miles down this mountain. Yeah, just outrunning the storm. And we're just getting smacked with hail and wind and like lightning and thunder's cracking. And we're like counting the miles to see how far it is. And we end up just like, and he's calming me down the entire way. And like, I'm trying to look him up on social media, but I can't find him. But if you're out there, message me because you were my life savior. And we get down to the aid station together. And it was just like, dude, I literally was like, thank you so much because like you really, and this is the funniest thing of it all is I'm panicking and we're running and I'm like, dude, this isn't good. And he goes, well, statistically, your chances of getting struck by lightning are pretty low. And I was like, Quinn, that doesn't take into account running down a mountain above tree line with metal rods in your hand.
Yeah. Right. Most people aren't in that place when a storm comes.
Yeah.
Okay, but I have to ask, did a part of you enjoy it? Because as I see this in my head, I'm like, this is like main character vibes, like superhero running down this lightning hill. Like, did a part of you just think like, this is freaking awesome?
Like, this is why I did it, sort of thing.
Absolutely. Like, I literally loved, as scary as it was, that feeling of just like, I'm running for my actual life right now, it feels like, was just an amazing, I mean, you feel alive, and it just, it was just a special moment. I will always remember that. It was probably, honestly, my favorite, like, experience I've ever had in ultra running thus far. It was a special moment for sure, and it was, although it makes a great story, it was a very fun experience for me, and it was awesome. So we ended up getting the aid station alive, so that was good.
Good. I'm glad you didn't die.
Yeah. Especially like as you say that, like us out here in Utah, like I know exactly what kind of storm you got caught in those mountain storms. Like they are here. I've lived out here for like 8 years, and when I'm on top of the mountain and I see those clouds rolling in, I still get scared.
We got caught in something like that a couple years ago when Jacob did Ute 100. We were both on top of the mountain, and
the lightning
there was
just
lightning
flashing everywhere around you.
Yeah.
And when you're that high, because I was about probably where you're at, around 10,000 when that happens. It is terrifying because that's where lightning strikes do happen, when you're that high in exposed areas like that.
And it's scary, and I don't recommend anybody doing it, but just the rush of it all was so special, and it was just that felt good to be scared.
Right? It does feel good, and then to come out of it and be oh heck yeah.
Well, I was just gonna say, if you're gonna be an ultra runner, you will experience that at some point. So I don't think there's I think it's inevitable.
And that was one thing I didn't anticipate going into mountain ultras is just how fast the weather changes. I mean, it was hot, and then fog comes in, and then it's storming and hailing and windy, and then it's sunny again, and then it's freezing cold. Like it just so going into my next mountain ultra, I'm gonna like have all 4 seasons packed in my bag.
Dude,
You got to, man.
I had Melody carrying around a whole duffel bag with my clothes because of that reason alone. Anyways, so all right, so then you get to what? This is like mile 30 something now.
Yeah, so mile 33, and this is the time I got to see my girlfriend and my crew since mile 18. So it's been a while, and it was really good to see them. I changed my clothes. By the way, there was flash flood warnings in Colorado Springs, so the trails were just disgustingly muddy.
Yeah.
So I had to constantly change my socks. And I got, new clothes on and went off. And this is what I mean again with the weather is, so I take off and I have about 12 miles just straight descent. It's very steady, but straight descend on easy trails all the way to then what would be the mile 45 aid station. And I was like, I'm off the mountain, I'm out of the storm, I see blue skies, like I'm going. And it just becomes so cold. And I don't have any gloves, and my poles are really cold. And I'm about a mile into my run, and my hands are like turning like purple, and I'm starting to like not be able to like use my fingers very well. And I'm like, dude, I can't go 12 miles with like frozen hands right now. And I swear to you, as I'm running down, in the middle of this random remote mountain trail, probably dropped by another runner, is just a single glove. And I was literally like, I am the luckiest guy alive. I'd rather be lucky than good, because that was my lifesaver. And I put it on, and I just had it for my left hand and had both poles in that hand. So that solved that issue. Descended down to mile 45 really easily. Was feeling really good. Picked up a pacer at 45. We then we ran like probably a fastest half marathon-ish. It was 12 in a like 0.5 or something, so almost a half marathon. But our fastest split was in that section. We passed a few people. Got to mile 57, picked up my next pacer, one of my good friends, Jordan Kennedy, who played with me. He's been like one of my best friends since I was a kid. We headed out 11 miles together to kind of half of it was through urban streets, and then the rest of it was through this park called Palmer Park. And it started downpouring, and so the trails, they were already muddy. It became like unmanageable mud where you couldn't run. Like you literally couldn't run. It was so slippery, and it was just your feet would get caked with mud, so then you'd have to like bang your feet on rocks to get it off. Yeah. And we just literally, and I was trying to kind of save myself a little bit before this part, and then I just hit this mud, and I'm like, I can't even run if I wanted to. I was still feeling really good. So we ended up, that really slowed us down. I was on pace for finishing sub 24. And then once I hit all this mud for the next, like, basically 25 miles, I mean, it just slowed me down dramatically. So then I pick up my next pacer. So this is mile 57. My next pacer is, this is mile about 70 now at this point. And
so what time is this?
So this is at
what time?
This is about 9:30, 10 p.m.
Okay, sun just is setting.
Yeah, and so I pick up now my next pacer, Johnny McCormick. Let me tell you about Johnny McCormick. He actually lives in Utah. He flew in from Utah to run the race. He was planning, he's not an ultra runner, he's not a runner. He was planning on running 10 miles. That's what I told him. 2 weeks before the race, I said, 10 miles, that's not going to happen, because the aid station you would take me to at 10 miles, there's no crew access. You can't leave. So you have to either not pace me or you're going 20. No question. Next text message, I'll do 20.
Dang.
And you want to talk about, like, I know some people don't run with crew or pacers, and they wear it as a badge of honor, and I respect it. If your goal is to run a 100-mile race or run an ultra race without pacers, that's fine. But if you want to win, if you want to be the best ultra runner you can be, and you want to have the best performance you can be, why would you not have crew or pacers?
Yeah.
I think people don't use crew or pacers for 2 reasons. One, because their circle isn't right, because I have people texting me asking me to pace me. So if you don't have people that are willing to go out there and pace with you, then you should maybe look at your friends. And then the second thing is I think you're too arrogant. And if you're too arrogant to think you're Rambo and you can perform better in a 100-mile race without people supporting you, then I think you're foolish. My crew was phenomenal. My girlfriend was unbelievable. She stayed awake the entire time. She paced me the last 12. She changed my sock at every aid station. Every single one of my pacers was just on it from the beginning. No questions asked. They all loved it. And you just become much more powerful when you have positive peer pressure around you. You either rise to the occasion or you fall back to a more comfortable zone. And everyone I surround myself with is an absolute winner and is an absolute savage. And that's why part of that race went so well for me, is because I was surrounded by winners. So Johnny and I head out 20 miles, and now it's night ops. So we're running overnight together, and we get to about 4 or 5 miles in, and the trail was tampered with.
Oh.
What?
And it wasn't, I don't think it was by another runner. I think because they set up the flag. So, I mean, it happens in ultra running. I don't blame Aravipa. But it became so bad where you would, like, and these trails weren't obvious. So it was just like you had to use so much mental energy to navigate. And Johnny, the entire time, we did not talk for like 4 hours. The entire time was looking at his phone like this with the map downloaded, navigating us through every turn. And there was a few times where we missed a turn, but within 100 yards, he would be like, nope, got to go back. And he did. I mean, he was lights out. Absolutely lights out. And he navigated me through it. We crushed it, absolutely crushed it together. It was amazing. Got through it. Then we got to the end. We ended up passing like 2 people. We got to the end of this 20-mile stretch. And at the last half mile, and this is what I mean by like winners around you. We hit the last half mile, and he's like, I'm pretty exhausted. I've been running for, probably almost 22 hours, 23 hours at this point, exhausted. And he just calms me down, and we like just had a big climb, and he's like, all right, we have a half mile to the aid station. He's like, we're just going to sprint the whole way. And he's like, gather your breath. I'll take 3 deep breaths with you. We take our 3 deep breaths, and we just take off. And we finished, came into the aid station. Then I met my girlfriend there, who was then taking me 12 miles. And then, so it was 6 miles to the next aid station. And then it was 6 miles straight downhill to the finish. And we had one last big climb together. It was probably about like 1,000, 2,000 foot climb in a mile or two.
Which is a lot at 90 miles in or whatever.
Yeah.
Dude, this was mile 94. And this was the only time in the race where I genuinely was like, I'm at 100%. I am done. And we climb together, and she's doing a great job encouraging me and everything, and she does an amazing job of pacing me. She's paced me before. And this is taking me too long to get up this thing, by the way. And we're almost to the top, and I look behind me, and my girlfriend Mackenzie goes, hey, just so you know, there's another runner coming up behind you. And I'm so
she knows
done.
what to say.
And I go, but this was me in the moment. I go, Kenzie, I don't give up.
Yeah.
And she was just like, oh, okay. But of course, in my head, I was like, right now I don't care. But then I remembered, as soon as I cross the finish line, as soon as I get in that warm shower, as soon as I get a bite to eat, I'm just going to be like, why did you let that runner pass you? And I'm going to get so mad. Right. So then got to the top of the aid station. We were there for 2 minutes, like literally ate a pickle, ate an orange. And I was like, Kenzie, we're going. And we sprinted to the finish line. And I looked behind me, and this was like a switchback zigzag all the way down. And I looked behind me, and I can see this ended up being the first place female. And I can see her, and she's about 100 yards behind us. And I literally was like gas pedal, and we started flying even faster because I literally was like, I know I can't keep this pace the whole way to the finish. My joints are too messed up. My mentality is all messed up. My shin splints are messed up. But I want her to turn the corner and not be able to see us anymore and just kill all hope that she
Take
can
her
pass
soul,
us.
right?
Take her soul. That's what I wanted. And we ended up just doing that, and we sprinted across the finish line, 8th overall, 26 hours. The only first in my age group. I was the only person in their 20s to finish top 10. And I was the only person from the Midwest to cross the finish line.
Heck yeah, you totally showed that freaky smiling dude who's boss.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what I'm talking about. Also, I love the story of you snapping at your girlfriend because it's just so relatable. I work with one other coach who, one of his pieces of advice is never to run with your spouse or a girlfriend or a boyfriend. And I'm like, it's kind of understandable, but Jacob and I run together, and he's my favorite pacer.
Yeah.
We know how to pace each other, and you just have to tell your pacer, like, hey, I'm probably going to snap at you. I'm going to be a jerk. It's nothing personal, and you just, your pacer in that moment just knows, okay, he's just super tired and hungry, and it's fine.
Yeah.
You say
100%.
that, as you say that, Jake, it makes me recall my first 100. I had a good friend of mine come out and pace me, and he saw me through the worst of it, at my lowest point, and he then had to leave me at my lowest point, and he knew how I worked, which is a little bit similar to you. And he's like, hey, just so you know, and he mentions another friend, a mutual friend of ours. He's like, Ben doesn't believe you'll even make it to mile 80. And he's
Yeah, you guys are the same. When you talk about what fires you up, I'm like, that's what fires Jacob up.
I remember in the moment he told me, I almost rolled my eyes at him. I'm just like, I don't care. I don't care what Ben believes. Right now, I am hurting so bad. This is so bad. I don't even care about not making it to mile 80 about Ben. But then, it stays in your mind, though. Then, I kept going, and that stays in your mind. And you're like, you know what? Ben can freaking, suck it.
Dude, that's a
I'm
superpower.
finishing this thing,
That's a superpower, to be able to use negativity and turn it into an arsenal of motivation. That is a superpower, and some people don't do it. Some people hear that and they're like, yeah, Ben's probably right. But then there's other people like you that hear that and they're like, what the hell does Ben know?
Yeah, exactly. What the hell does Ben know? He's probably going to listen to this and love it.
I hope he does.
Yeah. He actually, getting a little off topic here, he doesn't listen to many of these pods, but he told me he doesn't run, but he told me he listened to yours, and he's like, that Jake Rastas guy, I like that. So anyways.
I appreciate it, Ben.
Yeah.
Shout out to Ben.
Shout out to Ben. I love him, though. He's a great guy. As you say that, and we're talking about mindset and how things, work with us when we're out there doing these big races, you said something really, that I thought profound earlier, and you said, you're going to prove yourself right. And I was like, oh my gosh, how true is that? And I was just reflecting on my past races where I start to get really down, and as I start to get really down and keep entertaining that idea of you know what, I don't even really want this. At Scout Mountain, there was a moment where I was questioning, I don't even know if I want this. I thought I wanted this, but do I actually want it that bad? And I started to prove myself right in that moment, and the desire for that finish started to go away until someone freaking chopped my butts and said, no, Jacob, you're getting up, you're running the rest of this. And then I'm like, yeah, I am. I can, but anyways, I just thought that was really profound with, you're going to prove yourself right, whether you're, and I think you're a great example of that, Jake, with how your mindset was just, I'm doing this. There's no ifs, there's no ands, there's no buts. I'm doing this, and I'm going to do whatever it takes to do it. And
yeah, I already know I'm going to do it. Now you guys just all have to wait and watch. Wait for me to do it. That's what it is. It's not exactly.
Yeah. And you're not going to entertain. You're not going to prove yourself right about DNFing, about, not making it to the start line because of injury. You're not going to entertain those thoughts because you're doing it. So you're going to figure out a way to do it. And I respect that. And I think that's really awesome. And you set a great example on that.
Honestly, I think if we all had your confidence and your mindset, I think we'd all be running 100-mile races. Yeah. We'd all be finishing them.
Listen, you have to have a little bit of an ego to do this stuff. And
okay,
I say, no, but ego is good. Every winner should have an ego. And this is what I mean. So an ego fueled by entitlement is different than an ego fueled by capability. An ego fueled by capability is that I believe that I can do anything, but I know that I'm the only person that is going to have to put in the work to do it. No one's going to give it to me, but I know I can do it. An ego fueled by entitlement is that, hey, I'm the man. Everything's just going to come to me. Like, it's, that's just how I am. That's just foolish.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And also, I think it's also powerful to admit that you have an ego. That it requires a little bit of ego.
Yeah. Okay. Few more questions before we let you go. One thing that you said to us in a preliminary email about what you learned through the process of running 100 miles was you said that you learned patience. Mm-hmm. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, I mean, patience, to be out there for 26 hours by yourself and have the patience to just take it aid station at a time, it's difficult. And you get frustrated, you get angry, you get sad. There's a lot of things that can distract you. And just to be like early in the race, my whole mindset was I just wanted to stay in striking distance. So that requires me to just be patient. And to know that it's going to be a long day and I need to stay present. I can't sit here and worry about this is the key to running ultras. If anybody wants to know, this is the secret to running ultra marathons is you have to shrink your mind to the most manageable thing that you can. When 100 miles becomes too long, you shrink it to 50. When 50 becomes too long, you shrink it to the next aid station. When the next aid station becomes too long, you shrink it to around that corner. When around that corner seems too far away, it's just right foot, left foot. And that takes patience. And to do that for 26 hours is difficult. And to have the patience to do that, you then, in life, will be able to stay calm and stay present and stay patient and understand that if I just focus on this small task right here, it's going to lead to the bigger task down the road. That's patience.
I feel like that is like straight from God himself. I'm like, that is so powerful, man.
Yeah, I mean, it's the truth.
No, I agree. That is as we've been, in the ultra running scene for a few years now, what you're speaking really is the truth. Like, if there is a key to finishing a ultra marathon, it's just that, shrinking it down to something that's more manageable.
And it really does transfer to life. Ever since our first 100-mile race, we use that analogy every single day. When things are hard, we just think, okay, or we remind each other, okay, we just got to make it to the next aid station. Yeah. When that seems too hard, we remind each other, just one step at a time.
Yeah, let's just make it through the day. We know what the big goal is. What can we do today to make things a little better tomorrow?
Such a powerful lesson.
And that's the beauty of the sport, honestly, is that it translates to just living a much better life.
Yeah. Amen.
Everyone needs to run ultras.
Yeah.
Honestly.
So, Jake, what is your plans now moving forward after doing this 100?
That's a good question. And I will say, I remember, so I told you guys the story of my 100K, Frigid Fox. And I will say that race was harder. For me, this 100-mile race, was easier. So when I crossed the finish line, I feel like I gave it my all. But I also was like, dude, there's so much more deep down that I can do with this. And I knew that I haven't been brought in the 100-mile distance yet. I know what I'm capable of. And so that makes me think, what is next? And I have races that I want to do. I really want to do a last man standing race. And I was looking to do one in Maine in September 2nd. But it's full, of course, because every race that you want to do is full.
Yeah.
So
by this time,
So I'll be looking to just try and I want to find a last man standing race, a backyard race that literally is going to bring me to my knees and then some. And then after that, I'm going to try and do the Kettle Moraine 100-mile race to qualify for Western States. And the plan is to then do Western States or, maybe a 200-mile race or maybe Leadville after that. So I want to do a last man standing race, and then I'll do the Kettle Moraine 100-mile race in June. And after that, who knows? But, it's funny. I was talking to one of my friends who he actually just ran his first marathon last weekend. And we were just kind of chatting, and he just got into running, and he goes, You know what's weird what's worrisome is that I don't really see an end to all this. It's like, so what happens when I do this marathon? Exactly. What happens when I do this marathon? Do I just want to run a marathon faster? Do I run 50 miles? What happens after I do 50 miles? Do I want to run 100 miles? And that's what I told him. I said that's the point. It never ends. And once you just constantly, people like us that are wired like that, they just constantly want to find the roof. They want to find their limit. And I know this 100-mile race didn't bring me to my limit, but once I do find that limit, this is the problem, is people like us get obsessed about now overcoming whatever that limit was. So it's a never-ending loop of then you become obsessed and you overcome that, and then there's a new limit. Yeah. So that's the problem, is this
almost
stuff
like
never
you're never
ends.
Satisfied, right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's like a drug. It really is like a drug, right?
Exactly.
Well, I think that's awesome. I mean, you talked about in your email that you sent us that you want to run a sub 24-hour 100 as well, and that you want to compete with the professionals at high level races, like you said, with Western States. So that is, I love those goals. And I really, from talking to you, I believe you got it in you.
Oh, yeah.
I really appreciate it.
You do.
Yeah. Like, it's going to be cool. We're excited to keep watching you and see what you do. And
just remember us one day.
Yeah.
Or like wear our T-shirt at Western States.
When you win Western States, just remember us. That's all we ask.
Yeah, I'll be decked out head to toe in Trail to 100 merch.
That's what I'm talking about.
I'll be a walking advertisement.
Or you gotta
you can be our first like sponsored athlete. At Trail.
Or you gotta you gotta go to one of those backyard ultras and run it with Jeremy, the ultra running guy. Cause
Jeremy, you are going down.
Yeah, you gotta go take that man down because he loves those races, those last man standings. So
Jeremy, send me a link. Let's do it.
Exactly. So Jake, thanks for coming on the pod. Like, this has been a really great hour, and honestly, like, the stuff that you share is good. It's good stuff. It kicks me in the butt. Like, sometimes I have something you say, it can rub me a little, but most of the time it's rubbing me the wrong way because it's hitting me in the sensitive spots because I gotta change a little. So the world needs people like you. So thank you for being who you are and doing what you do.
And really, congrats again on this big accomplishment. I can't wait to see the documentary. It really is awesome. And to get 8th overall and to, I want to like give a shout out to all of the ultra runners in their 20s. Jacob and I also started in our early 20s, and we were so proud that we were like the only 20-year-olds when we did the Bryce Canyon 50. Ultra, and we had people ask us, "Are you guys teenagers?" Because we also have baby faces and we look like we're 10. But anyway, shout out to all the 20-year-olds who are running ultras. I just think that's awesome. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, it's awesome when you see like the younger crowd there, especially because most of the runners are in their 30s and 40s. Yeah. So it's kind of special when you get to see, some young blood out there. Yeah, for sure. So before we let you leave, where can our listeners find you at if they want to reach out, ask any questions, or just see more of your content? Yeah, for sure. And first of all, I just want to say, like, thank you guys genuinely for all the support. And your guys' podcast is great. Everything you guys do is great. And so I just, I'm glad I've gotten to meet you guys through the sport, and one day we'll all do a race together. But yeah, so again, genuinely, thank you so much for the support. It means a lot. You can find me on Instagram at Jake Rastas. I post pretty regularly there. And then my YouTube, Ultra Vet Rastas, is where I'll be posting the documentary on July 22nd. And I post like weekly videos, just, thoughts, mindset, kind of similar stuff that we talked about on here, but in a more condensed form, I guess. Cool. So. Perfect. Sweet. And all that will be in the show notes. All right. Well, thanks, Jake, for joining us today. Look forward to seeing what's next for you. All right. You guys are the best. Thank you. Hey, guys. Super exciting news. Pine Tree Running is now Trail to 100 coaching, and Jacob is officially a coach. That's right. So if you're ready to take the next step in your training and run that race you've always wanted to run, we would be honored to help guide you on your ultra running journey. At Trail to 100 Coaching, you'll receive a custom running plan with strength training options, constant communication with your coach, And you'll be connected with other runners like you who are also on their Trail to 100.
If you want to learn more, check out our website, trailto100.com. Please feel free to contact us with any questions you have.
If you want to run 100 miles,
Make it happen.